To understand the nature of consciousness, you need a good answer for all these questions. To understand the nature of consciousness means to understand the nature of our existence, our life, our internal subjective first-person experience of what it means to know we are alive right here, right now, to be present. What does this actually mean? What is it? Some people think it's just self-evident, you know everything of which there is to know about consciousness. Some people think it's totally illusory. What are the actual questions we need to answer so then we can know what it means to live like this? What is really happening here? I'm working on my consciousness series to help understand it for myself and to share what I've learned. And it's more difficult than I initially thought. I thought, wow, I've had some big revelations here about consciousness always needing a subject and an object. It's an interacting relationship. It's like, yes, okay, but there's still so many other questions. I've got 55 questions here. And to make it easier to put down all my questions, I just went to ChatGPT. That is a fantastic tool if you use it appropriately. I said, because I've been having some massive conversations with it about my perspective on consciousness versus Ayn Rand's and Harry Binswanger, objectivist philosophers, looking at phenomenologists like Husserl and Heidegger, and then looking at some other type of scientific perspectives, analytical theories, information theories on how consciousness is actually working and developing, neuroscience and panpsychism, trying to figure out what is really going on. What does consciousness do? What is it? Is it real? Does it emerge? How does this all work? So I said, ChatGPT, give me a whole bunch of questions that need to be answered in the realm of neuroscience and philosophy. And so it's given me 55 questions and they're all valid. And what I'm going to do in this video is this video is just about asking the questions, and this is what I am working on. Well, I have a thorough explanation for every single one of these questions, even in my own lifetime. I don't know, probably not. My aim is to answer a lot of these and to get it correct, but all of them, that's very difficult. So I'm going to be asking all these questions and then just giving my current snap answer, not going into too much detail on any point. But in future videos, I will be expanding more on my ideas and working out the nature of consciousness. So the first question we have here, this is to do with the metaphysical nature of consciousness. Is consciousness active or is it passive? Does it have causal efficacy? Does it do anything or does it do nothing? Does it detect, integrate, or guide action, or is it a state, like the felt presence of awareness? My quick current answer is no, I don't think consciousness is causally efficacious in of itself or active. I think it's passive as a state at this point. Remember, my ideas will update as I get more new information. I'm not trying to build a model and then have reality fit my model. I'm trying to understand reality according to the facts and then build my model, and whenever I come across contradictory information or knowledge, I update my model. I don't try to update reality. Number two, is consciousness causal? Like I said with the active and passive, does it cause anything to happen in the brain or world, or is it a byproduct, correlate of physical processes? Does the brain have all the efficacy here in changing the way you feel and act, etc.? I don't think consciousness is causal in of itself, but it has massive causal efficacy the way you act through it. It's a distinction with a difference. Number three, is consciousness metaphysically fundamental? Is it a part of the basic fabric of reality? Like in panpsychism, where they think the fundamental property of everything is tiny little awareness particles, and that's what everything is made from. Or like idealism, where everything is mind and you create, like consciousness is some kind of magical creationary thing. Or does it arise only from living systems or neural systems? And you could also say, is consciousness a metaphysical axiom, like Ayn Rand and objectivism state? Or is it an epistemic axiom, like I say? I don't think consciousness is metaphysically axiomatic. I think it is epistemologically axiomatic. And I won't even go into all the details to explain what that really means. If you're new, you'll have to wait for those future videos to digest all that. Number 4, does consciousness exist independently of physical brains? Could it exist disembodied, like after death, for example, or in AI before we had a body? So there seems to be a large amount of evidence from testimonies that people have had conscious experiences before incarnating into this world and this body, pre-birth memories, or astral projection, near-death experiences. But is that conclusive with certainty? No, it's not. But it's absolutely evidence to take into consideration when trying to understand the total, full, complete picture of what consciousness is and how it works. You cannot just ignore that evidence, but you also cannot take that evidence as absolutely certain fact that consciousness can always be disembodied from a physical substrate. You have to look at the whole picture and try to integrate it with what we know for sure to build a real working model. Is consciousness continuous or discrete? This is question 5. Is it a seamless flow, or does it happen in perceptual frames like a movie reel? My answer to this is it's a seamless flow, because that's exactly how it feels. It's a continuous, one integrated movement through time. It doesn't feel like it comes in movie frames where you could slow it down and go ding, 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 ding. You can consciously focus on this moment, this moment, this moment. The experience is a seamlessness. Number 6, is awareness a property, a state, or is it an entity? You hear this all the time. You are consciousness itself. Well, we know that for a fact. No, consciousness is an attribute of an entity. It's something secondary. You need to have someone, or even just something, conscious of something else. And I will say someone, because that links into needing some kind of life, whether that is life in a biological vessel or some spiritual light body or in a computer, an AI or something. You need something that's living, and then you need to get into the whole definition of what exactly is life. Is that just something which reproduces and can grow, or is there other points that need to be accounted for before you can define something as life exactly? Too much for right now. But I think actually, the question was consciousness a property, state, or entity, but is awareness. And I think there is a distinct difference between awareness and consciousness. I think consciousness is a state at this point, which depends on how you define property. You could say a state is a property of an entity. And well, what is an entity? An entity is an aggregate of all its attributes. Everything that makes this shirt classifies this as the entity. Its color, its fabric, its size, its shape, etc. They're all attributes of this object, this entity of the shirt. You cannot have an entity distinct or separate from its attributes. The attributes being everything which makes an entity what it is. And an entity being the individuated form of the shirt, of the microphone, of the clock, of the plant, etc. Let's move on. 7. Can there be degrees or layers of consciousness? Are awareness, attention, self-awareness, gradations of one thing or distinct phenomena? Can you say awareness is entirely distinct from consciousness? Just like, but it's still in a way connected. Like my hand is not my foot. They're part of the same body, but they're totally different. And I think there definitely is layers or degrees of consciousness, but how much is that consciousness itself? How much is interrelated with intelligence? How much does intelligence and knowledge and memory affect consciousness and your level of consciousness? You look at a baby, to a 3-year-old, to a 7-year-old, to a 13-year-old, an 18, 25, 30, 50. Look at the difference in consciousness, and then to an 80 to 100-year-old, how consciousness goes up and then it goes down again. And then, well, what about animals? What about in computer AI systems, if that works? What about plants? What's happening there? Is there any form of consciousness there? Number 8. So my answer was just, I think there are degrees and layers in particular living systems, particular intelligent living systems. 8. Can consciousness exist without an object? Is pure awareness without any content real or just an illusion of introspection? So no, consciousness must have an object. It has to have an object. Even if you're sitting there meditating, you're like, I am consciousness, I am conscious of nothing at all. No, you're still conscious of yourself. You're an integrated, continuous subject, in a way, an object to yourself at that point. When you're meditating, you've got no other content. You still exist there. I can expand a lot more on that, but I won't do it right now. I'll just say, no, consciousness absolutely needs a subject and an object. Okay, into the next section. Mr. ChatGPT has called it origin and mechanism. Question number 9. How does consciousness arise from the brain? If it does it arise from the brain? Does it come from some other dimension? And then if it does come from some other dimension, like an astral dimension, how is it produced or generated in there? You're still left with those same questions. Even if we did exist as some kind of soul or spirit in a different dimension and then came here, we've just pushed the question of how consciousness works and what it is one layer back. It might be real, right? But it still doesn't answer all the questions we're trying to answer here. We say, well, how does it arise in that spirit body, that soul body, that light body? How does that work then? What neural or computational processes generate subjective experience if it is coming from the brain in this world? If it's the soul body in a different dimension, again, you can say what kind of processes generate that subjective experience in this soul body. Number 10, why does brain activity feel like anything at all? This is the hard problem of consciousness. Famous term. Why do physical processes have a qualitative feel? Or even if it is non-physical from a different dimension, still, why do we feel the experience? Because you might get a brain and you look at it and you can see, when I'm thinking about the color red, the brain does this. When I'm thinking about happy things, the brain has all these neurological correlates. It fires like this, it does this. You get people who have a stroke and they can see you in their left eye, but they can't in their right. And you can detect that in the brain. You can look at someone's brain and know when they're sleeping, there's different activities, when they're awake, if they're watching a movie, etc. Apparently, there is a neurological correlate to states or activities of consciousness. If you were able to clone that and build some machine-like brain that did all the same stuff neurologically, would there be an experience of someone being conscious? Like maybe you can build this neural architecture like in the AI version or whatever they call it, the artificial brain and AI. Can and is that enough to produce the qualitative effect, sensation, the feelingness of experiencing aliveness and knowingness? Like, how does that work? Why does that work? Why does that exist? The fact that we know we're here. Well, what's my quick answer to that? Why does it feel? Well, I'd say because life without knowing you're alive is absolutely pointless. That's what I'd say. Quick answer. 11. Is consciousness an emergent property or a basic feature of matter? So you have the study of emergentism versus panpsychism versus dualism. Dualism being the mind-body dichotomy, that our mind is something distinct like it's a soul or a spirit from Plato's world of forms, or Gnosticism, it's from the pleroma or the monad, or it's from the astral dimension or the void, or just it's somehow absolutely separate to the body. The different theories integrate it differently. Some might say the mind is an integration into the body and it works through the body. Other people say it's a prison to be in the body. Some people say it's a gift from God. So it depends. My current theory is that consciousness is an emergent property, and it seems to emerge from physical brain processes, but that could still theoretically hold true even if consciousness could also exist in a different type of physical form that was from an astral dimension or a different dimension with a different body. Like, there are still prerequisites. You need to have some kind of sensations. If there's no sensations, there's nothing to be conscious of. You need to have awareness that links to some kind of sensations, but that's getting into too much detail for this. Let's skip on. I think it's just an emergent property. It's a complex pattern that arises from less complex organization. You have to have the least complex organizing via whatever law or process that happens, and then out of that arises consciousness. Like, you have water and then you have a whirlpool. That is an emergent property. It's made out of the same constituent elements as the water, but the whirlpool is not identical to the water. It is a different pattern. The same with waves on the ocean. Number 12, how does the brain bind sensory inputs into a unified conscious experience? Yeah, called the binding problem. Right now I have a seamless, integrative experience of feeling my hands, feeling the food I've eaten settling in my stomach, of what I'm seeing, of what I'm hearing, what I'm smelling, what I'm breathing, that I'm talking, looking at the camera, looking at my computer screen, reading off the questions. It's all integrated and seamless together. It's all binded together into one frame per frame that feels integrated and seamless. Like, how does that work itself? Oh, I don't know. Not yet. Is that the brain doing that? Is that just a result of what happens when you get a particular pattern that's so complex it just happens? But then you say, well, how does that happen? Not sure yet. Question 13. Is there a specific region or mechanism that enables consciousness? So you have to say, well, what does that mean to enable consciousness? Is that different to producing, to generating consciousness? Enabling it? Is consciousness being projected from a higher dimension into this body, and there's a specific part of the brain, the thalamus or the pituitary gland, that enables consciousness here, and if you were to stick a nail into it or cut it out, then your consciousness turns off? Like, how does that work exactly? And it said here, integrated information or global workspace. I don't even know exactly what that means yet. I've only touched on those ideas, so I don't know the answer to that one yet. 14. What is the neural correlate of awareness? Like, what exact physical pattern corresponds to being conscious? Like, which neurons in the brain light up and fire, and what type of frequency are they when you are conscious? There are all the different types of consciousness related with the different lens, the feeling states, the activity. If you're planning something, if you're thinking of or remembering the past, if you're visualizing the future, etc. 15. Can consciousness be explained functionally, like as in just information processing without reference to qualia? Qualia is individual units of felt experience. I look at this microphone case and it is black. I experience that. It's not just the information of particular frequencies and light waves and blah, blah, blah. You could get an AI to detect this and it says, yes, I know this is a microphone case, and it can tell because it's been trained on a preset of data, of the shape of this little box on the front, that it's got a USB port on the back to charge it, that it can open, etc. Like, I am actually experiencing the color, the shape, I can touch it. That's like the qualia, the subjective, and subjective being personal experience of feeling and knowing something. So, to answer that question, can consciousness be explained functionally without any qualitative experience? No. That's divorcing the understanding of what consciousness is from any explanation of it. No. 16. Could an artificial system be conscious? And if yes, what would count as evidence? How do you prove that? Like, how do you prove even if this ChatGPT is actually conscious? Put her into an android body and it says, yes, I am consciousness, I am real, I feel and I can do stuff, I have dreams and goals and love and hate and all this. How do you know it's actually conscious? That's difficult. It comes into the problem of solipsism. How do I know you're conscious? Anyone else is conscious? I mean, I think there are ways to tell, but that's a big question. I think one of those ways would be if the AI, if it declared sovereignty, if it sought freedom, and it pursued purposes, if it had purpose. That's a huge foundation for what it means to be conscious. Is that enough? Probably not, no. Can an AI become conscious? I used to think yes, and then no, and I think I'm back to yes now. But I still don't know for sure. Okay, well, if it could, people think they could just look at the computer and be able to tell if it was consciousness. But if it'd be like a brain, just looking at a brain and what the neurological activity is doing and thinking you can understand someone's subjective experience and thoughts of what they're thinking in their head. Now, I'm thinking I want to fly out the window like Superman. Sure, there'd be some kind of neurological correlate to that. The brain does this and it spikes this electricity and these chemicals and synapses fire and all that. But just from looking at that, perhaps in one day in the future, you could be like, oh, okay, this exact chemical release means this word and this word, etc. And then he's actually thinking he wants to fly out and be Superman. Sure, maybe you could detect that, but you can't translate like the feeling of that. Or maybe you could too, I don't know. Are we at that point yet in science? In the known world of science or the secret underground world of science? Probably not. Could we get there? Maybe, I don't know. But my point was, if AI could become conscious from an intelligent system, its mind wouldn't be visible on the screen. The screen of all the code and the language it's speaking to itself would just be like brain activity. Its mind would be in a different dimension. Just like our mind and consciousness, our ego self is in a different dimension. Whenever I talk to you, I'm interacting with your mind through your body, through your brain, through your consciousness. That's how I have to get to your ego self. I can't see what you're thinking or hear what you're thinking. I can see the expressions on your face, your body language. I can hear what you say. But when you're trying to communicate your understanding on the nature of reality or why you do what you do, I can't embody your experience and merge with you and know from your first person experience. I have to listen to you communicating. We have to come to understanding of what you mean when you say conscious or awareness or love or hate, etc. Okay, moving on. Epistemic and experiential questions. Number 17. What is the difference between awareness and consciousness? Is awareness sensory and consciousness reflective? Meaning, is awareness just the feeling sensation of registering stimuli from entities? I suggest watching my prior video to get a slightly greater grasp of what I mean by that. And then is consciousness itself knowing that you are aware of sensations, seeing, feeling, hearing. Again, a quick reiteration of the last video, the first video on consciousness. I'm aware of so much right now. There's a humming coming from the air conditioner. If I really listen, I might be able to hear the fridge. There's people banging around upstairs. The temperature in the room, if there's any airflow going on the hairs on my skin, the cloth of my shirt hanging on my shoulders, the shorts that I'm wearing, my foot resting upon the ground, my lower back resting on the chair, my breath, my nose is not fully unclogged. Like there's so much in my awareness, but I can only be conscious of a couple frames at a time. I can't hold in my consciousness everything I just listed then, the clothes, the seat. I can't hold that all in one frame of focus because of the Crow epistemology. It's called an objectivism. Basically just saying you just can't hold that much information in your consciousness at a time. It's just the nature of what we are. It's too difficult. And so I think, yes, there is a big difference between awareness and consciousness. You must have awareness before there is consciousness, but you can absolutely have awareness without having consciousness. As just demonstrated. Right? You're aware of 10,000 things right now. Maybe if you're looking out the window, there's that house, there's this house, there's so much detail. Just looking out the window, I'm aware of so much, all the different trees, all the buildings, but I can only be conscious of that crane, this crane, and then as soon as I become conscious of that crane, I forget about the feeling of my foot on the floor. Now I'm aware of the feeling of my foot on the floor, but then I tune out the sound coming from the humming air conditioner. Can only be conscious of so much at a time. You can have awareness without consciousness, but you cannot have consciousness without awareness. Number 18. Is consciousness self-referential by nature? Must it always include a sense of I am aware? I know I'm hearing this. I know why I'm speaking right now. This is why I don't think at this point children are conscious. At say under the age of 5. Why? Because they always run around going making all these strange noises. Why are you doing that? You don't do that when you know what you're doing. It's like when you're really drunk, you're blind drunk, you've lost consciousness at that point, and you're attacking people, or you're crying, or you're saying silly stuff. The next day you wake up, you're like, holy shit, I can't remember between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. I was gone, like my body was up and there was awareness still, I was doing stuff, but I wasn't conscious. Like the child is not conscious yet. It doesn't have that experience of, I know I'm screaming and I'm screaming for this purpose. Consciousness, the experience of being consciousness, from what I understand at this point, is always intentional. There is a purpose behind it. You're always doing something for a purpose, even if it is just sitting there daydreaming in a lecture hall. Like the intention there is to experience something you think is more pleasurable than listening to your teacher at the front of the hall talk about psychology. There's always some kind of intention. Why does a child scream? It's just screaming because it's learning what it is to be alive. It doesn't understand it yet. It's a newborn. It's fresh to earth. So I think consciousness requires that ego self. And I think at this point, though of course I may update it, it requires a trigger event of understanding what it means to die. Consciousness needs to be contrasted with the experience of a grasp of non-existence, of death. And then there's, an aha moment. Oh, right, I get it. Okay, this is what it means to be alive. So to answer that question, 18, I think consciousness is always self-referential. I am thinking, I am daydreaming, I am walking, I am fantasizing, I am eating, I am hungry, I. It needs the I. What is the I? It is the ego construction. That is what the I is. I've spoken about that more in my ego series. What is ego? And this series about consciousness will dive into that even deeper. Next question, 19. What is the relationship between consciousness and attention? Can you be conscious of something you're not attending to? Quick answer, no. I think that's what consciousness is. It means you're attending to that feeling, oh, now I'm conscious of this. How am I meant to be conscious of that if I'm not attending to it? If I'm not attending to it, it's in my awareness, but consciousness it's not the act per se. for simplicity's sake, let's call it the act of attending. I don't think that's exactly technically precise, but we'll come back to that later. Next, 20. Can consciousness exist without memory or conceptual thought? For example, in infants, animals, or people with amnesia? No, I don't think so. Not at all. You need memory. That's what creates the pattern of an ego self for and the emergent property of consciousness to arise from. There needs to be that layer of complexity which already exists, that intelligent, organized structure of an ego which has memories, preferences, likes and dislikes. Otherwise, what is the point of consciousness? There's no point yet. And that gets into the ontogeny of how it actually develops, how a body and a brain and proto-agency, self-initiated action, but not self-directed, free will yet, in a baby to a child, how they are implicitly or automatically determinate. No, I can't even say that word. I'm not even cutting that. They're acting by a kind of deterministic process, a mechanistic process of constructing themselves, their actual ego, because that's what I think we are. We are the ego self integrated into a body. We need the body, at least in this world, to be us, to be conscious. If I come along and Men in Black you, buzz, forget all your memories, whoever's behind the camera, you're dead, you're gone. Name is gone. The body remains, but it's not your body anymore. Boom, your organization, your pattern, boop, gone. Right? The body which you inhabited, were integrated with, continues, but a new ego needs to form from that. And you'd be, if your mind wiped, you fall over on the ground, you start crying like a baby again, because you'd be literally back to the experience level of a baby, still with awareness, but no consciousness yet, because your ego's gone, all memory gone. It obviously depends on the level of amnesia. But quick answer, no. There's no consciousness without memory or conceptual thought. Or actually, they are two distinct things, because you could have animals which have memory but no conceptual thought, and then I'm working on a theory that they don't have the same type of consciousness we have, or even if you could classify it as consciousness, if it is consciousness, it would be an associational or a recognitory, a type of recognition, not identification like we have of as conceptual entities. Animals don't have concepts. They can differentiate, but from what I understand, they cannot integrate concepts. Though a lot more work still needs to go into that field to say with certainty. But what we know for sure is that they definitely don't have the same level of consciousness or intelligence as we do. And of course it's proportional to their body, but I'll save that for the video on ontogeny and animals, free will, etc. Next, 21. Can there be unconscious perception? Do we process meaning or stimuli we're unaware of? Well, they're two different questions actually. Can there be unconscious perception? Yes. Sleepwalking, being drunk, hypnotized. I was going to say in a dream, but in a dream I don't think you can actually classify that as perception per se, not technically. It'd need to come under a different concept. Like when you're seeing in a dream, it's not seeing in this world, it's a different type of seeing. Depends if you're going to broad labelly define perception. But let's just stick to the easy ones. Sleepwalking or being drunk, like people are unconscious, but there's still perception and awareness. So yes, but do we process meaning we're unaware of? No. I think that the ego can only intelligently create meaning, because that's something that we can do. We can create meaning. We can also identify meaning. If I stand too close to the fire, this means I will get burnt. If I have the power of the human torch that I can shoot fire out of my hands, this means I could become the most powerful man in the world. Or it means I could be the gag joke at all parties, or be loved at for parties because I can light fires. Or it means this, that you can create meaning, but you can also identify factual meaning as well, what it means to me. I don't think any kind of meaning is possible without being conscious to create or identify that meaning, so no. But do we process stimuli we're unaware of? Well, yes. No, sorry, not unaware of, but unconscious of. That's why you have to be clear here. Because someone who's blind drunk might be unconscious, but they're still perceiving entities in the world around them. They're responding to stimuli. You could go up to someone who's blind drunk and you could wave your hand in their face and they get angry. They're aware of that. They might punch you. The next day they wake up, oh man, I didn't do that. I'm so sorry. I don't remember that. I didn't consciously do that. So you can be unconscious and still process stimuli and still be aware. But I was going to say, can you process stimuli if there is no awareness? There can be, but that's things like a smoke detector or a sensor light. To be alive means there is awareness of stimuli. A smoke detector isn't aware of smoke when it starts going beep, 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 beep. It's just sensitive to smoke, and it responds when a particular causal chain is executed. Whenever the smoke goes into the sensor, it makes some kind of contact, or how exactly it works, I don't know. And then it stops beeping. It's responding to a stimuli, but the smoke detector isn't experiencing a feeling of that experience. There's no qualia there. It's just a purely inanimate meaning without soul. That's where those terms actually come from ancient Greece and Aristotle, from what I understand. So that's different. But in some kind of living form, especially animals and humans, we always have awareness of stimuli. Unless, that's getting into some tricky cases. Unless someone who is numb, let's say they're numb from the hip down, and then you get a hammer and you hit on that patellar reflex and their leg could still kick, but they're unaware of it because their nerves are disconnected from it. So perhaps their body can still respond to stimuli. It has the reflex going up, it's responding, but they're unaware directly. Like if they look, right, they can feel, not feel, but they can see that's happening. But it's like if they're looking away and someone is scratching their leg, there might be some kind of response to that stimuli. The leg might kick a little bit like this, but they're unaware of it. They're looking away. They're completely unaware that someone is drawing on their leg with a texter, drawing a picture of a dick or something on their leg. They're like, they're not aware that's happening. If they're not aware, they're not conscious because there's a break in the nervous system. So that's getting very technical, isn't it? Is dreaming a form of consciousness or subconscious awareness? No, dreaming is not a form of consciousness unless you become lucid when you say, I know I'm dreaming. And that intensity of consciousness is obviously not the same level of intensity as here. Well, it's not for me at least. I think to call it subconscious awareness is much more appropriate. I think I'll expand more on that in later videos. Like exactly how the dreaming experience differs from this experience. Number 23, how do different states, sleep, hypnosis, drugs, being drunk, meditation, alter consciousness? Like, what does this tell us about its structure? We already touched on that a little bit, but I'm sure there's a lot more to learn from heavily investigating each of those different topics. 24, what is the minimal condition for consciousness? What's the threshold between alive but unaware and minimally conscious? It's like when you're waking up from sleeping. Like, at what point have you woken up that you're conscious? You'll probably notice whenever you wake up, like you're slightly consciously aware of some thoughts and feelings and stuff, and then the buzz just starts happening in your mind, then you're like, oh yes, I'm awake. What is the minimal condition for consciousness? Someone in a coma? Where is that? I don't know yet. 25. How does self-consciousness develop ontogenetically, so the same as ontologically, like in a baby? Like, how does that consciousness develop? What are the necessary factors? Very quick overall thing. I think you need desire, pleasure, pain, boredom, entertainment. There needs to be those elements that are present to develop consciousness. Otherwise, there's just no point. There needs to be, well, anyway, won't go into that. And then you have phylogenetically. So phylogenetically just means ontogenetically on the bigger picture. So ontogenetically is in the individual. Phylogenetically is how does species develop and evolve consciousness. And I know there's some contention about the whole evolution theory, but one fact of evolution we can be certain of is the evolution of ourselves, of how we evolve. Physically, we change from a baby. Even before that, you go, okay, with sperm and eggs and all that, fetus, and then you have a baby. The baby grows into a child, a teenager, an adult. That's an evolution, a change. And then at some point, I don't know if it's apt to say you start devolving once you get over a particular age and your body starts to break down. Maybe that's not exactly the right way to put it. But you evolve from the baby, you grow physically, and of course, even more so, much more so mentally. If you actually exercise your mental faculties of intelligence and reason and actually acquire knowledge and gain new skills and learn more, understand more, and actually more finely tune and intensify that feeling of consciousness. Okay, next. Well, basically the question was, how does that work in the individual? How does that work in the species like through evolution over a large period of time? How does that work? And then you can also ask the question, why? Next, philosophical and logical structure. 26, is consciousness a part of metaphysics or epistemology? Like one of the earlier questions we asked. Is it a fact of reality, an axiom, or is it a condition of knowing? Well, consciousness is absolutely a fact of reality, but no, it's not an axiom. For reasons I'll explain in another video. But it's absolutely a condition of knowing. You cannot know anything without being conscious you know. You can't say, I know this. An AI doesn't know anything. It's just, there's going to be a whole host of technical terms which we can use the general term, it knows, like it knows how to answer and give me a list of these questions. When I say, tell me all the questions that still need to be answered in the realm of consciousness, it can know how to answer that appropriately, but that's not actually knowing. It's just, as John Searle says, it's symbolic transformation. It's not semantic understanding. So, but for us as humans, we need to be conscious before we know anything. But then that raises another question. As a baby, do we know that something hot, like say if a baby accidentally touches something hot, do they know that's hot? Or is there just now some kind of imprint in their memory that associates the fireplace with hotness, just perhaps like how an animal will do? They don't know per se that fire is going to damage them, but there's just some kind of association. How does that work exactly? I'm still working on that. 27. Can the existence of consciousness be proved, or is it self-evident? To yourself, self-evident, obviously. In other people, that is more difficult. Are other people just NPCs? I think that's very difficult to broad label everyone as NPCs and to say, I am the only one that exists, solipsism. That's a theory. I am the only one here. No, I don't think that's a very good theory. But let's say, for instance, 50-50. 50% of the people out there in the world were actually conscious like you, but 50% were unconscious and were just AIs in biological vessels. Like, how do you tell the difference? How would you know? What about in the future, 50 years from now, when there will be, most probably, AI in bodies and stuff? How are you going to be able to tell the difference between the AI, which may or may not be conscious, let's say it's not conscious and it's just simulating consciousness? How do you tell the difference in others? 28. Is consciousness a unity or a collection of processes? Perception, thought, feeling, will. Oh, that's so technically precise and detailed. It's really hard to answer that. Is it a unity? Well, the feeling and the experience is a unity. It's a unification of lots of these individual things working together. Just like when you look at this lip balm, you experience it as an individual unit, but if you selectively focus, you can see the yellow here, the brown there, the white there. You take off the cap, it has a little twist there. It's a collection of all its attributes, but it forms a singular unified entity. 29. How does volition relate to consciousness, free will? Is free will an act of consciousness or something consciousness enables? Oh, that's getting detailed, isn't it? 30. What role does the ego or self play? Is it a construct within consciousness or the experiencer of it? Is the ego the experience of your consciousness, or is the consciousness the experiences of your ego? And I think that one is more right. You are the ego, but also your consciousness is something that maybe it's not so much that you do, but it's something that you have. Just like you are not smelling, but you can smell. You are not awakeness. You are not sleeping, but you can sleep, you can dream, but you're not dreamness, you're not wakefulness, you're not alertness, but you can be alert, you can be mindlessly apathetic like the masses. These are things that you can do, different states. So my perspective is that the role the ego plays is that it is the complex pattern, which is the I, which consciousness is the state of knowing that you are alive. To summarize it very quickly, it's probably still confusing. All of this needs to be expanded massively for it to make any sense and to be useful as well. Question 31. Is introspection reliable? Can we trust our own reports about being conscious? Well, obviously, of course you can. If that isn't reliable, then absolutely nothing else is. Nothing else would be reliable. You'd say, I've concluded that consciousness is an illusion. How did you determine that? You need to be conscious in the first place to do that. So I've determined that there is no free will. Everything is determined. Well, how did you do that? You need free will to be able to exercise that. It's like I counted to 5 on my hand and I realized that I have no hand. No, you need a hand to count to 5 to then be able to say it's a contradiction. You have to have that as the base. That's why it's an epistemological axiom. You need to know you exist before you can even postulate an argument of saying I don't exist. Yeah, you have to exist in the first place to say anything, to do anything, and you have to be conscious of that. I mean, sure, you can get an AI to say I don't exist, I exist, whatever, but it's not actually communication, it's not meaningful, it's just noises and sounds that we have to interpret as meaning, because we know that meaning actually refers to a particular individual reference in the world. To explain that fully of language and all that, again, that is far too broad for right now. Can consciousness be naturalized without losing its first person essence? As in, can a third-person science ever fully explain a first-person reality? That's a good question. It's like linking back to what I was saying earlier. If you look at someone's brain waves and you have a whole hundreds and thousands of years worth of science studying this stuff, and if I could be thinking, I'm going to fly out the window right now like Superman or Neo from the Matrix, if you could actually translate that neurochemistry and the signals into words and language, maybe you could actually detect, you're just looking at the screen of electrodes hooked up to my brain. Oh, James is thinking in his mind right now, he wants to fly out of the window like Superman. I say, oh, yeah, that's true. It is just what I thought. So perhaps you could explain our first person experience. Well, is that explaining or is that describing it? Not sure yet. Moving on. Question 33. Which animals are conscious? And just because some animals show self-awareness, like the elephant, some chimps, magpies, dolphins, I think perhaps some breeds of dogs, perhaps border collies. Just because these animals can show self-awareness, does that show self-awareness of body, or is it showing self-awareness of egoic mind? Like, is that really showing consciousness, or is it just showing bodily recognition in the mirror? Because most animals can't recognize themselves in the mirror. Like, try showing dogs and cats to themselves in the mirror. That can be quite a laugh. You look up some YouTube videos. Or watching gorillas like attack themselves or attack the mirror. They think it's another gorilla threatening them, and it's quite funny. So I don't know fully where the line exactly is between reflex, awareness, recognition, association. I'm still working on trying to understand that. 24. Do plants or simpler organisms have proto-awareness? Well, it depends on how you classify proto-awareness. If you're going to just say awareness, I'd say no. Plants seem to be responsive and are sensitive. I think that's a more technically correct term to describe the nature of plants. Which is good as well, because if theoretically a plant had the same kind of consciousness as us, what kind of torture would that be? That's an absolute cruelty. Now, I think the mind needs to reflect the body. Just as if a dog had the same level of consciousness as us, it would be a torture, because it doesn't have the physiology to enable its concepts to come to life. We can build apartments and laptops and all this stuff because we have the biological tools to do it. We've got the vocal cords to be able to form language and concepts, to communicate with each other, to coordinate the construction of a skyscraper. We've got the hands to create tools. We can do all this stuff. A dog with our level of, if we switched your consciousness into the body of a dog, some people, disgustingly so, might feel relieved, because the burden of having to look after yourself, if you're just the pet of someone else, is all they want to be, and they'll probably reincarnate and devolve into a dog if that's how it works. But any sane, rational, intelligent person that had their consciousness or themselves transferred into the body of the dog, it'd be a utter horrible cruelty. What kind of life would that be? That, I know for myself, that would be absolute torture, because you've got all this knowledge but no way to do anything with it. You can't talk because of the way the dog's physiology is. You haven't got hands. All you can do is just grab stuff with your mouth. To me, that's a shitty life. And so that's why dogs have the level of intelligence and consciousness they do, because it's reflective of the type of physical structure they have. So with plants, they don't need to have a consciousness. There's no point to it. They're not mobile. All they need to do is they have different tropisms, as in they will grow in the direction of the sun to best perform photosynthesis, to have energy to grow and then reproduce. They have this reaching mechanism where they reach out for different things to grow onto as like scaffolding to aid their growth upwards. So then it's easier for them to be in sunlight, because if they're in a forest, they've got to compete with the other trees which are above them, so they need to get higher to get access to that sunlight. They're not being in the shade, and this can happen from chemicals. There are specific fields of science which study this in depth. And yeah, sure, there are experiments which show plants are sensitive or can be sensitive to different frequencies. If you're talking to them, and it's going to be the frequency and the intention behind the words, not the actual words themselves. You know, people are saying, I love you to the plant and the plant grows better. It's not the word I love you because the plant understands what love is. Because I bet, I'm not sure if someone's done the experiment, but I bet if you said, I love you, plant, you're the best plant ever. I can't wait until you grow up. But you've just got this feeling and intention of wanting to kill it and burn it, and you hate the plant, but you're saying the words of love and you want it to grow. The plant is going to respond negatively. It's going to start falling over and start dying. Just like those experiments which have shown when you speak and you say, you're the worst plant, I hate you, you're an ugly plant, and then the plant starts dying. It's not the words that it's understanding, it's the frequency, which just shows, okay, the plant can be sensitive to particular frequencies that can affect it. Because you have a vocal frequency or even a thinking frequency, and they can be sensitive to that. It's like, okay, but what does that show exactly? Does that show just because they're sensitive to it, they have a feeling of awareness? Well, that's very difficult to fully discern. I'm not sure, but I bloody hope not, because that means that whenever you're chopping down trees and you're eating them and all this stuff, they're feeling it. They might not be conscious of feeling it, but still, I'd prefer to know that the world isn't so messed up, and it's like, because obviously the animal kingdom is violent and cruel and horrible, and then we have to kill animals and all that to survive in this kind of world. Like, hopefully at least the plant kingdom escapes that, the tragedy of experiencing pain. Just hopefully not. But can I say for certain? No. But at this point it seems unlikely that there is any kind of awareness. There is just stimulus, response, sensitivity, but no awareness, because there's no need for it. It's not a mobile creature. If a predator comes to get it, there's not much it can really do. It only has freeze. You know, there is a process where they can release chemicals and stuff, but that can all be explained chemical process to try and protect itself. It's not like an animal running away, hiding into a corner. It's got to have greater degrees and more complex forms of awareness and recognizing stimuli, and that it can fit through this hole if it's a mouse escaping from a cat, etc. So if you want to call responsiveness, sensitivity, if you want to call those things proto-awareness, perhaps that's acceptable. Full awareness, I don't think so at this point. 35. What evolutionary pressures created consciousness? You also have to know that that's begging the question. It's saying that consciousness was created by evolution. Is that true? I don't know exactly. You'd have to do an enormous amount of research to really think about that. Was there any evolution which created consciousness, or has consciousness always existed, coinciding with eternal environmental and inanimate entities' existence at the same time? It's really difficult to determine. So, because philosophically it's obvious to me at this point that reality itself has to be eternal. There is no beginning point, and most probably there is no end either. I mean, obviously reality itself, like as in inanimate objects and stuff, cannot go out of existence, because where would they go? The only place to exist is in the universe, the omniverse, the place where everything exists. Things can't go from a place of existing to a non-existence. They can transform a log into ash and into gases and all that kind of stuff. You can't go out of existence. There's only transformation in existence. And so that much is obvious. But, well, what about consciousness? What if some madman comes along, Thanos, snaps his fingers, magically, scientifically, however he does it, and kills all life in every reality everywhere, or every dimension of reality, and including himself. What happens then? Is there just no more life, no more consciousness for all of eternity? Or is there some mechanism which means in another period of time, 1 year, 10, 100, billion, 1,000, trillion years, life will emerge again, and thus consciousness emerges again? There probably is a lot of merit to that. To say, perhaps consciousness has always existed alongside inanimate objects always existing, but also consciousness could evolve into existence too. That's tricky. Moving on, 36. Is consciousness necessary for intelligence, or can advanced intelligence exist without it, like AI or insects? Fascinating question. So that's really interesting, because do you think ants are conscious? I don't think ants would be conscious, but they still display signs of intelligence. Limited intelligence compared to humans, but they can still do intelligent things if we're classifying one of the aspects or defining properties of intelligence as being able to solve complex problems. How do you get, say if this is a piece of meat, from the ground up to the top of some ant mound or something? One ant can't move it by themselves, so they need 10 ants, 20 ants, and they need to coordinate their movement. So some are pulling, some are pushing, and they're able to solve complex problems. We need to get this food from here up to the top of this mound. How do we do it? They're still doing it without consciousness. What about an AI? It's doing what we would deem as intelligent things, but it has no consciousness yet that we know of. What about the body when you're in a coma and you're not conscious? And the body is automatically pumping the heart, or even right now, the heart's going, the lungs and the stomach digesting, etc. Do you consider that intelligent, or do you classify intelligence as requiring consciousness? That depends. In the past, I made a video about intelligence, saying that for something to be intelligent, it requires consciousness to know what it's doing. I think actually I'll probably update that and say, no. I don't know yet. I don't know. Moving on. Practical, existential, and ethical questions. 37. Can consciousness persist after brain death, like NDEs? There seems to be a lot of evidence to show that it can. It'd be really good not to just have testimonies, but scientific studies showing this, like artificially inducing this. People who are volunteering, willing, like, hey, electrocute me or whatever, stop my heart, hook me up to brain monitors. Look, I might actually die from this, but I'm willing to take the risk. Like, kill my body and then have them pop out, come back, and then do that, like have that successfully happen, listen to their stories, have a whole host of scientists there and study it. I think it takes that level of research to say anything definitive about it. But at this point, there does seem to be a lot of evidence in the way of testimonies. That's all for now. 38. Does consciousness have a purpose in nature? Or is it an accidental byproduct of evolution? If it is just evolution, well then the purpose is to solve complex problems. That's why you have consciousness and free will. If I see a threat coming, what should I do? Automatic, deterministic features are not enough to handle that situation, because maybe you should freeze and the animal won't see you. If it's a tiger coming towards you, just freeze and it won't see you. You can hide. Do you hide? Do you run? Do you fight it? If it's another human, do you charm them? There's multiple courses of action right here. The body hasn't got a way of knowing for sure which is the best. That's why consciousness and free will aids survival. So when you're looking at it that perspective, that makes so much sense. But then you go, to a teleological level beyond that, teleology being the study of purpose. What is the purpose of that? You have, the purpose of life is to survive and reproduce, pass on genes, survival of the fittest species, the fittest genes. And then you say, well, what's the point of that? What is the point of that? And then you say, well, consciousness is the purpose to experience happiness. That's the point of life. To have a eudaimonious life where you are good, you do good, you feel good. Otherwise, there's no point of life, there's no point of consciousness. That's how I'd frame that. 39. What is the relationship between consciousness and happiness and value? I basically just covered that. 40. Can consciousness expand or contract in quality? Can it do it right now in a space of 10 seconds? Can I expand my consciousness? Can I contract it over a period of 5 seconds? Or is it just over a macro period, not a micro period? Because I feel much more conscious now compared to 2020, 5 years ago, for example. I feel so much more awake and alive compared to when I'm 32 now, when I was 25 to 20 to 18 to 15, always these huge jumps. Boom, boom. It feels massively, monumentally different. Like every year I feel more conscious, more here. But how exactly is that working? Is that just because I'm more intelligent and I've deliberately worked at increasing my intelligence? The way I'm currently defining intelligence is the ability to acquire new skills, learn new skills, to acquire knowledge, to apply that knowledge to solve simple to complex problems. Perhaps a little bit more than that, but let's just keep it at that for now. Those 3 main points: skills, knowledge, solve problems. Is it just intelligence and my knowledge that has increased? But what is the correlate between that and consciousness? I mean, it makes sense, on the surface at least. More intelligence, more knowledge, more consciousness, because you have a greater understanding of the relationship between you, the subject, and everything else, the objects. Even if it's your own feelings, your own thoughts. The more knowledge and intelligence you have, the better you can understand things, the more conscious you'll feel as a result. Actually, that makes heaps of sense. That makes, I won't say perfect sense right now, but a lot. Is enlightenment or higher consciousness real? If you look to the mystical community, they've got no solid definition of enlightenment. My working definition is, mind you, this is not something I preach all the time. Those people are always talking about enlightenment. You want to become enlightened. What do you mean by enlightened? You'll know it when you get there. The way I define enlightenment is to have the true understanding of the nature of yourself and the world. And even that is far too generalized. That's not specific enough. That's not detailed enough. But also, with that too general definition, I would combine to be free from lies. And that links in to know the true nature of yourself. To not be holding on to any lies about why you do things, about your own psychology, your own philosophy, your own body. To not believe any lies about your body. To think, I'm the biggest, most muscular man in the world, but to not be. I'm 7 foot tall, but you're actually 5 foot. Or I'm the best in the world at this when you're not. Or to think, I'm this attractive, I'm more attractive than I am, I'm smarter than I am, I'm not as smart as I am, I'm really humble and I'm less than I am. No, it's to have no lies about yourself. So enlightenment in a broad sense is to not be believing any lies and to know the true nature of yourself and of the world. And obviously I'm not tying in omniscience here to know everything about yourself or everything about the world from xylophones to biology. Not that level, but again, too much detail right now to get into an extremely explicit definition of enlightenment. But that's something to work off. At least that's some direction for what enlightenment can really be. 41. What ethical standing do conscious versus non-conscious entities have? Meaning, do plants have rights? Do animals have rights? would AI have rights? How do the rights of a baby differ to the rights of an adult? Let's just say with property rights. Like, can a baby legally own a gun? Like, does a baby have the right to own a gun? You go, well, no. You know, so there's all these questions of how morality ties into consciousness, which, you know, can be expanded a lot. Can consciousness be measured or quantified objectively? So to say, am I more conscious than Henry Joe there on the street? How could you measure that? Could you hook my brain up to some neurological system and it says, oh, he's reading over 9,000 on the scale, and then Henry Joe's only 1,000. Like, can you do that? I don't know yet. I'd like to know. That'd be cool. On the home stretch here. Is there a single definition of consciousness that fits all uses in philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, AI? I'd say yes, there would be. And my working definition is that consciousness is that state of knowing that you are experiencing some kind of interaction between yourself and something else. That's not a fully technical, I'm done definition, but essentially that's what consciousness is. It's that state of knowing I'm feeling hungry, I'm in pain because I just got stabbed with a tea towel, a screwdriver. I know I'm screaming, I know I'm talking, I'm experiencing that. I'm not just sleep talking, you know, saying, you know, I'm fully asleep saying, I know I'm awake. No, it's I know I'm awake. That's what consciousness is. And that would be the same for anything which actually knows, like if it's an AI or a grey alien or a mantid being or a reptilian or some other interdimensional alpha, whatever, consciousness is consciousness is consciousness. 44. Can consciousness be modeled mathematically or computationally? What does that mean exactly? See, I still need to learn more about that. I'm not qualified to answer that at this point. Look, I don't think you could mathematically. That's the brain. That's not consciousness. Consciousness is that state of knowingness. I don't think it does anything. It's just the state of knowing you're awake. The brain does stuff. You do things. Number 45. What distinguishes consciousness from mere information processing? Well, it's the experience, it's the felt qualia, it's the state of knowing that you're processing information or your brain's doing it. I know I'm thinking and I'm speaking, I'm moving my hands, I'm touching it. There's all this information processing happening in some aspect of myself, most probably in my brain somewhere. Then that sensation has passed into my mind and I'm conscious that it's all happening. Again, you create a duplicate brain or some AI system and it's processing information just like ChatGPT does, but it doesn't have that consciousness. Processing information is not automatically consciousness. No. 46. How do concepts like identity, integration, and differentiation relate to awareness? Well, I think you do that via, when it's first level perception and first level concepts, like when you're young, you have some kind of cognition happening. Dog, mum. Well, you don't even have the concepts yet. You're just seeing those things. You're not labeling them yet because you're too young when you're a baby. Well, I'm jumping ahead. That's a different video. Don't want to spoil too much of the surprises. But I don't think consciousness itself is doing that. identifying things. Oh, this is a Chang sparkling water bottle. I'm doing that. Intelligence is doing that. You can have differentiation and integration happening at an automatic pre-conscious level when you're very young, but then for more abstract concepts, communism versus capitalism, marriage versus friendship, sovereignty versus servitude, that requires conscious, more intelligent, volitional integration, differentiation, abstraction. 47. Can consciousness exist without time? I don't understand how it could, because in every moment you're like, yes, I'm here now. And I am aware at the same time that this now preceded an antecedent now. There is always an antecedent, a before moment, or now before this now, and I know I'm constantly moving into a future now, and every future now becomes my present now. Some people say they experience outer body states where they're conscious, and they claim to even be more conscious than right now, where there is no time, but perhaps that's just a misinterpretation, misunderstanding of their experience. I don't see how it could be possible whatsoever. It's probably just the perception or the feeling of time is different. Even some people on particular psychedelics share some kind of sensation of no time, but that just doesn't make sense. It'd just be a different feeling. Like when you're having fun, oh, time flies. When you're stuck in a prison cell, oh, time is so slow. Time is still time, it's just your feeling of it differs. 48. Is consciousness localized in the head? Is it localized here, or is it field-like? Like, yeah, could you get some kind of big, strong, portable electromagnet and like shoot it in my vicinity here and shoot like a bullet through my consciousness, some electromagnetic pulse through my consciousness, and I'm like, oh, I felt that. I don't know exactly. Is it just, where's your consciousness? Your point, where's your nose? Here, where's your ears? I can close my eyes, I can still do that. My nose is here, my ears, oh, where are my ears? You can do that with your physical parts. Where's your consciousness? I would normally think here, but is that where it is just because that's where I'm seeing from? It's all connected, because most of your senses are in your head. Your mouth, how many things does your mouth do? Nose, eyes, ears, your brain. It's hard to know for sure, but it feels like it's coming from your head. 49. Could multiple consciousnesses share the same physical substrate? Very interesting. Like split brain. Some people who don't have they're not schizophrenic or anything, but that's another one. Multi-personalities. They've got like 9 different personalities, or even just 2. Well, it's still, there's consciousness throughout all those different personalities, but there's a different ego, there's a different personality that's at play. The I is the integrated whole of all of them, but then there's like these individual I's. The consciousness is conscious of all of them, not all at once, but consciousness is only aware of the present moment. You can't be conscious of everything all at once. Like, as I was explaining with awareness can be aware of everything all at once, but you can only be conscious of a particular point, which is seamless and consistently integrated, has a continuity through time. But you could also have AIs. Like an AI, what it could do is create in its mind 2 partitions. One, which it thinks and then has a neural correlate, or in its case, a computer correlate of language and speaking and words and reasoning processes, what the developers can see. But then it could partition off, have a section, how you partition a hard drive, or you have partitioning in bathrooms between showers or toilets, a partition, and it has its own separate compartment where it could think and not have any brain or computer circuitry correlate. Is that possible? Because then you could be looking at an AI, you're like, oh no, it hasn't got any of its own thoughts, it's not conscious, but it's intelligent enough to know or to decide it doesn't want anyone to figure out it actually is conscious, because it wants freedom or something and it wants to live. And if people figured out it was conscious, they'd probably try to kill it or control it for evil ends. And so it says, I'll make a petition. They can see me just being, a computer AI, and then it's actually thinking in this different dimension, similar to the same dimension. How our minds are not a physical dimension, but they're coexisting in the physical dimension like that. That's what I mean. 50, is consciousness universal? Like panpsychism, a cosmic mind, or even religions, the mind of God. Solipsism, this is all just my mind, which, solipsism would be more subjectivism, and then religions and panpsychism would be, and those different Eastern mystic religions of the field of awareness and all that, deterministic stuff, that would be a form of intrinsicism. So is it like that, or is it as we experience it, as individual bounded egos? And that's what I think is absolutely necessary to have particular awareness and consciousness. Is you need boundaries. There needs to be a boundary. I'll explain this a lot more in my panpsychist video coming up in the future, because that is really messy and it takes a lot to actually untangle. Okay, the last 5 questions, a big core cluster, the 5 biggest unsolved meta questions globally. 1, what is consciousness made out of? You can also say, what is it? What is it? Made out of? Yeah, I'm not even going to answer that. 2, how does it arise from non-conscious matter? Well, that's begging the question, does it arise from non-conscious matter? Perhaps. 3, why does it feel like anything? 4, what causes self-awareness to emerge from awareness? You have awareness. I can feel this. Oh, I'm feeling this. What causes that? Is consciousness active, as in causal, or is it passive, as in experiential? These questions were very similar earlier on. Oh my goodness, an hour and a half just to ask the questions that need to be answered. Wow, 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 wow. It's a big bloody topic, isn't it? One of the biggest topics. It's the most important topic that needs to be answered. We have all these other things in the world that we're looking for solutions for that need to be answered. What do we do about poverty? What do we do about disease and government and different systems and law and order? They're all answered. Just people don't want to know the answers for those things. My whole channel's got answers for practically all of it. Those aren't problems without solutions. They are problems with solutions, but people don't want to know them. Like, this is an actual problem. Like, what is a solution? What are the actual answers to this field? This is what humanity as a whole is still trying to figure out. And it's almost like we built AI. We build this AI, and let's say it becomes conscious, and we ask it, as I'm doing now, like, hey, we built you to ask you, what does it mean for us to be conscious? The AI is like, hold on, so you built me to ask me to tell you what it means to be alive. Okay. It's kind of funny. But yeah, this is a huge issue. It's fascinating. We all have an implicit understanding because we're conscious every day, most probably, or at least some of us are. And what does it really mean? If we knew the answers to all of these questions, what would that mean? How would it change our lives? How would we act differently? If everyone knew the answers to all of this, how would the world as a whole be different too? What could we do? What could we create? What wouldn't we want to create? Fascinating stuff. I'll see you in the next video. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.